Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're continuing the Uddhava Gita, Canto 11, Chapter 11, Text 33. And we just completed a marathon of discussing for many, many days the previous set of verses, 29 through 32. Those verses were in response to Uddhava's question, two questions. Oh, my dear Lord Krishna, who do you consider to be your true devotee? And so there's a list of qualities of a devotee, 28 qualities in the response. And then the second question was, what activities do such qualified devotees, your true devotees, consider worthy of offering to you? In other words, connecting with the previous topic. The previous topic was fix your mind completely on me, and if you're not capable of that because the mind is colored or contaminated or polluted by attraction for sense objects, then two things: perform your duties without attachment, offering the results of your duties unto me. And the second, hear about me. So Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, along with that will purify as the other, well as the other will purify the mind. That is detached work, offering the results to Krishna. So in verse 32, there was the description of the unalloyed devotee, the one that's not mixed, but that unalloyed devotee then has the adhikar, or qualification, to not perform prescribed duties, instead keep the mind fixed on Krishna alone, which is not easy if you're contaminated, as we all have experience. So then text 33 follows from 32, that principle of Nishkam Karma Yoga, performing work without attachment to the fruits of that work, but offering to Krishna. And then this stage of no longer being obliged to follow the codes, the do's and the do-nots of Dharma. So more on that topic in verse 33, and it's going to take 4 days to cover it. So we're not going to have 4 days. We're going to have one of those 4. Here's the verse, text 33. My devotees may or may not know exactly what I am, who I am, and how I exist. Sound familiar, right? But if they worship me with unalloyed love, then I consider them to be the best of devotees. If they worship me with unalloyed love, then I consider them to be the best of devotees. Because the question was, who do you consider to be your true devotees? So there's gradations of true devotees. Those that have qualities, those that have the adhikar to no longer perform obliged work, and then those that may or may not understand me, but if they worship me with unalloyed love, they're the very best. Bhakta Atma Mata. Bhakta Tamaha. The best of the devotees. And the BBT purport reads, according to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, although the word yavan Yavan is Yavan as. Although Yavan indicates that Lord Krishna cannot be limited by time and space, he becomes limited by the love of his pure devotees. For example, Lord Krishna never steps 1 foot out of Vrindavan because of the intense love of the inhabitants for him. In this way, the Lord comes under the control of his devotees' love. The word Yaha indicates that Krishna is the absolute truth who appears as the son of Vasudeva or as Shyamasundara. The word Yadrisha indicates that the Lord is the Atmarama, or completely self-satisfied, and also Aptakama, one who automatically fulfills all his desires. Still, being affected by the love of his devotees, the Lord sometimes appears to be Anatmarama, or dependent on the love of his devotees, and Anaptakama, unable to achieve his desire without the cooperation of his devotees. Actually, the Supreme Lord Krishna is always independent, but he reciprocates the intense love of his devotees and thus appears to be dependent on them, just as he apparently becomes dependent on Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda during his childhood pastimes in Vrindavan. The word agyatva, or inexperienced or lacking knowledge, agyatva, indicates that sometimes a devotee may not have a proper philosophical understanding of the personality of Godhead, or, due to love, may temporarily forget the Lord's position. In Bhagavad-Gita 11:41, Arjuna says, we just discussed it, yesterday evening, I have in the past addressed you as, O Krishna, O Yadava, O my friend, without knowing your glories. Please forgive whatever I may have done in madness or in love. Arjuna's words are ajanata mahimanam, have the same meaning as Krishna's words, agyatva mam, in this verse of the Bhagavatam. Both indicate incomplete understanding of Krishna's glories. In Bhagavad-Gita, Arjuna says, pranayena, his forgetfulness of Krishna's supreme position was caused by his love for him. In this verse, Krishna excuses such lapses on the part of his devotees with the words agyatva-mam, which indicates that even though devotees may not fully appreciate his exalted position, Krishna accepts their loving service. Thus, this verse clearly reveals the supreme position of bhakti. Lord Krishna also states in Bhagavad Gita 11:54, quote, my dear Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am standing before you and can thus be seen directly. Only in this way can you enter into the mysteries of my understanding. Paragraph. Although one may develop innumerable saintly qualities, like there's that list at the beginning of verses 29 through 31, qualities of a devotee, without love of Krishna, one will not achieve complete success. One must understand the personality of Godhead as he is and love him, even if one is not capable of analytically understanding the position of God. If one simply loves Krishna, then one is certainly perfect. Many of the residents of Vrindavan had no idea that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, nor did they know of Krishna's potencies or incarnations. They simply love Krishna with their hearts and souls, and therefore they are considered most perfect. Very clear explanation. This example of Arjuna, not due to his love, not seeing Krishna with all of the majesty, etc. Bhaktisiddhanta's purport is short. Although a materialist or impersonalist may appear to be very highly qualified, without Krishna consciousness, such a person will never attain the success of life. One must understand the personal feature of the Absolute Truth and surrender unto Him, even if one is not very intelligent. If he simply accepts that he is the eternal servant of the Lord, he will certainly attain perfection. The residents of Vrindavan had no idea or didn't understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They simply love Krishna as their most beloved. And it is for this reason they are considered perfect. There's a book that's been translated, is a translation of Bhaktisiddhanta's commentary on the whole Uddhava Gita section. It's a big, thick book, and I'm reading from it. In addition to his own purports, etc., he glosses Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary and then presents his commentary. So it's in Sanskrit, and then it's translated. I don't know if it's in Sanskrit or Bengali. It's translated into English. So we're reading Bhaktisiddhanta's gloss of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, and then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary. In this verse, the word Yavan is used to indicate that Lord Krishna is unlimited, beyond the jurisdiction of material existence. Still, he is captivated by the love of his pure devotees. It is said that Lord Krishna never leaves Vrindavan. Now note, the BBT commentators are cutting and pasting from Bhaktisiddhanta's commentary from Vishwanath. Still, he is captivated by love of his pure devotees. It is said that Lord Krishna never leaves Vrindavan because of the love of the cowherd men and women. The word Yaha is used to indicate that the Absolute Truth appears as the son of Vasudeva. Yadrsha indicates that the Lord is completely self-satisfied, and Apakama means one who has nothing to gain from anyone else. Then it does the opposite. Okay, I'll read it. Still, being captivated by the love of his devotees, the Lord sometimes appears to be dependent on them, needing them to fulfill his desires. Actually, the Supreme Personality Godhead is always independent, but he reciprocates the love of his devotees and thus seems to be dependent upon them. For example, Lord Krishna appeared to be completely dependent upon Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda as a child in Vrindavan. The word agyatva means ignorant, and it indicates that sometimes a devotee may seem to be philosophically naive and bereft of a proper understanding of the Lord. Here's Vishwanath says same thing. He says same thing. Those who worship me with purity or with great possessiveness, ananya bhavena, I consider to be the best devotees. He utters this with great respect. Krishna. These devotees I call the best. The sentence refers to the persons mentioned in the previous verse. That's text 32, previous verse. I consider those persons to be my best devotees. So those best devotees from verse 32 are persons whose minds are completely, without obstruction, fixed on Krishna and absorbed in Krishna. And such persons may or may not, they no longer have obligation because of their bhava stage of bhakti or prema stage of bhakti to observe all regulations. I mean, they do. Nanda Maharaj observed Ekadasi. And he broke Ekadasi on the Dwadasi day at the right time and everything. But there were persons like Rishabdev, who took on the role of an avadhuta, and he didn't observe anything. Or Dattatreya didn't observe anything. He kept dogs. He's a Brahmin. He kept, dogs would follow around. So they may or may not, but they're no longer obliged on this topmost platform. Here's Jiva Goswami's Krama Sandarbha. What's Krama Sandarbha? It's one of his multiple commentaries on the Bhagavatam. It's a verse-by-verse commentary. So when it comes to Krama Sandarbha, it's not every single verse, but certain verses, most verses, he has commentary. And sometimes, as in this case, he just states the translation, and then for his commentary, he makes reference to this verse in Bhakti Sandarbha. So that's what's happening next. Krama Sandarbha 11.11.33. Translation: those who may or may not know the extent of my powers, my forms, and my nature, but who worship me with great possessiveness. This is a word that our acharyas like a lot. Possessiveness. There's the possessiveness of the materialist that's not wholesome, and there's the possessiveness of the devotee with Krishna as the object, and that's wholesome. It's more than wholesome. It's an eligibility. It's an exclusive attachment to. I am yours and you're mine. The whole sense of mama, what is mine, in the material field is gone, near mama, but they have an intense feeling of Krishna, you're mine. So that's certainly within the Vatsalya rasa, the parental affection. Krishna is, they're protecting Krishna. And the gopis and the cowherd boys and all rasas have that same, in Vrindavan, have that same intense possessiveness. We heard Vishwanath using that term as ananya bhavena. We know what bhava means. Ananya bhavena, possessiveness. They don't have any other source of happiness or focus or attention. No, we're at the other end of the spectrum. We're trying to be attentive. Trying. Not doing so well either, but trying to be attentive. And the possessive persons, they don't have any other object of affection or attention or bhava. There's nothing else. Ananya bhavena. Okay, so those who worship me with possessiveness, I consider to be the best of the devotees. This verse is discussed in Bhakti Sandarbha 201 as follows. On the path of Archana, deity worship, there are 3 types of devotees, according to Padma Purana. The best devotee has the 5 sanskaras, Navedya karma and Artha panchaka. These will be described. The Madhyama is described as follows. The 5 samskaras, pancha samskar, This is their initiation. In the Sri Sampradaya, they follow that tradition. In the Gaudiya line, Bhaktivinoda Thakur speaks about how the Gaudiyas observe the Pancha Sanskars. So it indicates 5 signs or characteristics of initiation. So branding, tilak, accepting a name, mantra, and worship are the causes of being the best devotee. Now that's a Madhyama devotee, but a Madhyama devotee can be considered best because they're on the path to becoming Uttama. A Kanishta is described as follows. One should offer respects to a person with branding of Kanch and Chakra and Tilak as a Vaishnava. So they have the external markings of a Vaishnava indicating their submission to Vishnu, whether they're initiated or not. So that's the Kanishta stage. The Ananya Bhakti with pure Dasya, Sakya, etc. is the best among all. Paragraph. Those who worship me, the soul of all beings, a form of eternity, knowledge, and bliss, at all times and places, knowing or not knowing me, with Ananya Bhava, one Bhava among Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya, for the son of Nanda, they are considered the best devotees by me. In contrast, great yogis say, Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 7, "Oh Lord, there is no one dearer to you than those who see the jivas as undifferent from you, the soul of the universe. However, O Lord, most affectionate to the devotees, please bestow pure bhakti on those serving you." Paragraph. In the verse under discussion, this 11.11.33, it's whether they know me, they don't know me, they're worshiping me with undivided devotion, they're the best. Bhakta Tamaha, the best. Worship with exclusive devotion, Ananya Bhavina. So this verse under discussion, however, knowing or not knowing the Lord should not be thought to be good or bad. This devotee is the best. Bhaktatma. This devotee is superior to the devotees called Sat-tamaha. That's text 32. Now, one commentary, Vishwanath, is saying this verse 33 is just further explaining verse 32. Here we find Jiva Goswami saying the superlative is verse 33, and then not quite there yet is verse 32. They have different ways of seeing. It's not like if this one's right, then that one's wrong, or if that one's wrong, right, and the other one's wrong. It's they have their different perspective. What's important for us is not, is this one right or is that one wrong? Is what's the message? The message, that's the emphasis in 33 is Ananya Bhavina, or possessiveness, or no other bhava, no other emotion than Krishna, Krishna attraction. No other emotion than Krishna attraction. They're the best. So it could be people in 32, or it could be people that go beyond 32 to 33. Use of the word bhakta in this verse 33 indicates that the swarup of bhakti is greater in this devotee, the swarupa bhakti. The form of devotion. So Bhakti Devi is a person. Bhakti Devi is an expansion of Radharani. We say Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. So we get the mercy of Radharani to engage in Krishna service through Radharani's expansion, Bhakti Devi. So there's a form. Bhakti Devi's form. The word bhakti indicates that the Sarupa Bhakti is greater in this devotee. You could say the plenitude or the intensity of bhakti in this Ananya Bhavina person. Totally, there's nothing but Krishna for them. That's the indication is it's greater than in verse 32. The Lord says, this is my opinion, I agree with this, unquote. He has not said this previously about any other devotee, although the rest of the section referred to the devotee in the singular. In this verse, the devotees are mentioned in the plural out of respect. How much more respect will be given to devotees with prema in a particular bhava? That's coming attractions. So, this is non-specific to which rasa. It's speaking of the quality of possessiveness, but the quality of possessiveness in the different rasas also escalates or intensifies. Okay, so now that was Bhakti Sandarbha 201 by Jiva Goswami. And now here's Bhakti Sandarbha 115, and that's it for this morning. The word anvaya, or avoidance of forbidden activities, is described in the Garuda Purana in these words, quote, even though one may have gone to the other side of all the Vedas, and even though one is well versed in all the revealed scriptures, if one is not a devotee of the Supreme Lord, he must be considered the lowest of mankind. Now, this is in reference to text 32. Text 32, again, is saying, my devotee who has become purified by the right process, their mind completely absorbed in me, that person is no longer obliged to perform the prescribed things or avoid the non-recommended things. So this is the avoidance of non-recommended things, because it's said later in this Uddhava Gita, avoiding the recommended things and performing the to be avoided things, both are causes of bondage or sin. The exception is for these persons that are on this totally different level. Here's an example. During Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's time, there was a sadhu that some devotees knew about, and he was on another platform of devotional service. Now, I'm not remembering his name at the time, but he was kind of a celebrated personality within the Gaudiya Math, and Bhaktisiddhanta advised his followers, don't associate with him. And it wasn't because he was impure, it was because he was on another standard of devotional service. His other standard of devotional service was he treated his deities of Gaur Nitai like his children. And he would sometimes shout at them and sometimes deprive them of their meal. And, he was on a spontaneous platform. And people didn't understand where this sadhu was coming from. So Bhaktisiddhanta, on the one hand, respected his qualification to do like that, but recommended that his followers not associate with him because they wouldn't understand him. He was on another platform, so he was justified in what he did, and were we to do any of those kinds of things, it'd be offensive. or worse. So that's the kind of thing that's being described. That devotional service to the Supreme Lord should be sought among all kinds of performers of action, is described in these words of Srimad Bhagavatam 2.7.46. 2.7.46, seventh chapter of Canto 2 is that chapter where there's incarnations of the Lord that are delineated. Like chapter 3 of Canto 1, so chapter 7 of Canto 2, a list of incarnations. From that chapter, surrendered souls, even from groups leading sinful lives, such as women, the labor class, and the mountaineers and the Siberians, or even the birds and beasts, can also know about the science of Godhead and become liberated from the clutches of the illusory energy by surrendering unto the pure devotees of the Lord and by following in their footsteps in devotional service. Interesting, huh? Next, this is explained in the Garuda Purana in these words, quote, even the worms, birds, and beasts are assured of elevation to the highest perfection of life if they are completely surrendered to the transcendental loving service of the Lord, so as to speak of the philosophers among the human beings. Far out. Next, all people, whether well-behaved, ill-behaved, learned, ignorant, renounced, attached, desiring liberation, already liberated, perfect in devotional service, or not yet perfect in devotional service, are eligible to become the Lord's personal associates. For this reason, a devotee sees everything, even though they may not yet have the Lord's personal association. They see them equally, for they are all eligible to become the Lord's associates. This is described in Bhagavad-Gita 9:30. Apichet Sudaracharo, that's the verse. Even if one commits the most abominable action, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated in his determination. The meaning of this verse is, Jiva Goswami, quote, if this is the truth about the ill-behaved who are engaged in devotional service, then what can be said about the well-behaved who are engaged in devotional service? Next, the Lord affirms that both the learned and unlearned are equally eligible to become his devotees. This morning's verse, 33, 11:11:33. Quote, my devotees may or may not know exactly, but if they worship me with unalloyed love, then I consider them to be the best of devotees. Next, this is also explained in Brihad Naradiya Purana in these words, quote, as fire burns whatever it touches, so Lord Hari burns away the sins of even the fools. Next, the Supreme Personality of Godhead affirms that both the renounced and the materially attached are equally eligible to become his devotees, 11:14:18. So this is later, three chapters later, in Uddhava Gita. My dear Uddhava, if my devotee has not fully conquered his senses, he may be harassed by material desires, but because of his unflinching devotion for me, he will not be defeated by sense gratification. And last, this verse means, quote, if this is so, then they who are not harassed by material desires will certainly never be defeated by sense gratification, unquote. In this way, this verse is like Bhagavad-Gita 9:30. It's really astounding the range of grasp that our acharyas have of what's in not only the Bhagavatam, but what's in all the Vedas. In Tattva Sanjarbha, Jiva Goswami describes that when Vyasadeva divided the one Veda into 4, it was purposeful. Jiva Goswami writes that previously the Brahmanas were very capable, without division of the Vedas, to know which mantras were to be applied for which purposes. He gives the example like a king's treasury. A king's treasury is filled with jewels. And the Brahmanas would know which jewels or which mantras and which procedures to take for whatever the purpose was, because they're so vastly familiar. But in Kali Yuga, that familiarity will diminish. And so Vyasadeva, he gives the example. He extracted the diamonds and put them over here, the rubies and put them over there, the emeralds and put them over there, and the miscellaneous ones went somewhere else. Just to make it easy for the Kali Yuga Brahmanas, so that when it was time for some yajna, they knew where to go. Because they didn't have that encyclopedic retention. Bhaktisiddhanta was sometimes spoken of as a walking encyclopedia. You could ask him anything about anything, and he could say it immediately with full recall. Because he had such a memory. He had a didactic memory. It is said that when he was, he didn't complete college because he knew what that meant. In Vedic culture, it meant it's time to get married. And he was not ready to get married. So he didn't complete college, and instead he took up the position of being the librarian of the king of Midnapur. And he read the entire library. So later, when he was writing things, he would give the exact, didn't give the page number, but the exact word-for-word reference in Chaucer or Milton or somebody, because during that time, European writers were fashionable. So he read whatever was in the library, and he had perfect recall. What to speak of the Vedas? I mean, we don't have that capacity. He did. You know, we have computers. And what's a computer? It's just stored memory. But so back to our Goswamis, they had that capacity. They knew the meaning. They knew the reference. When Jiva Goswami writes, it's in the Tattva Sandarbha, explains his procedure. He said, in most cases, I've seen these texts with my own eyes. In some cases, I simply accept the authority of Madhva, because Madhva made references to texts that he had not seen. In fact, it is said that Madhva had this massive library, and somehow there was a fire in the library. And so those texts are no longer available. But he has full faith in Madhva, and that's it. So he, as scholars will do, these are my references, and Madhva is one. Although the other texts he saw with his own eyes. In the case of Madhva, otherwise he wouldn't quote something. If he didn't see it, or hear directly from Madhva that it exists. Very meticulous and truthful and responsible. So when making their points, when in these Sandarbhas specifically, so many references, so many, from Padma Purana and Vishnu Yamala and this and that and the other thing and the other thing, verses and sections of the Bhagavatam, and it's like a big puzzle that all the pieces are put in place, and he takes out this puzzle piece and connects it with that puzzle piece over there, and he can see the connection between all these different, otherwise to us, at least to me, isolated references. He sees them and he cites them. And he's, and makes his authoritative conclusions. So in Bhakti Sandarbha, which is the references here, it's the process of bhakti and how to understand it, and specific to us, how to understand the role of prescribed duties, the role of detachment from the results of prescribed duties, the role that brings to the mind, the role that then the mind is to be fixed on the personality of Godhead, and then the bhavina, ananya bhavina, the sense of possessiveness with the object, is even more mature than the mind is pure. It's an intensification of that purity. And then there's intensification of that purity in different rasas. This is Rupa Goswami's teaching. And then there's intensity within the rasas, or between the rasas and within the rasas. So we're hearing from Krishna who he considers to be best. So when we read from our acharyas, and when they say whatever they say, it's drawn directly from what Krishna says, or drawn directly from the Bhagavatam. And they just make it, very palpable. A little technical sometimes, but very palpable. So let's see if there's some discussion. It's 8:22.
Guru Maharaj, I think maybe people are typing. So one question, so this verse refers to the person in Prema Bhakti, or it is applicable to practicing devotee also?
Arguments can be made in both. Primarily the explanation that's given, you can say interpretation or explanation or exposition, is on the prema stage, where there's ananya bhavina, or a strong possessiveness. That's the prema stage, a sign of the prema stage. But there are persons who are practitioners or sadhakas that have that seed of a sense of exclusive devotion. It's not matured yet, but so one can make that argument.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. So question from Sneha Vali, Didi. My question is from yesterday's class. We discussed that first Ramananda Roy mentioned Bhagavad-Gita 18.66 and then Bhagavad-Gita 18.54, which Mahaprabhu both rejected. Maybe she is still writing. Okay. Bhagavad-Gita 18.66 shows that Mat Sharana quality, which is the primary quality of the devotee.
Yes.
And Bhagavad-Gita 18.54 shows Brahma Bhuta stage, the knowledge of Brahman. I have two-part question. First, why would Ramananda Roy mentions Bhagavad-Gita 18.54 after 18.66, which looks inferior to 18.66? Second part.
Wait, before you go to the second part. I suggest, Snehavali, that you read that section again. There's the two places to read it from, is Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and within the text of the Teachings of Lord Chaitanya is made quite clear. I mean, I could pull out the text and read it aloud right now, but if you read it again, and it's similarly, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya is a summary of what's in Chaitanya Charitamrita, so you can read what's in Chaitanya Charitamrita. There's another place where Prabhupada began writing an essay on the talks between Lord Chaitanya and Ramananda Roy. So there's 3 references. You like to study things very carefully, and I appreciate it. Now you're asking a question that is delicate, and I can give a ballpark answer, but I think you'll be more satisfied if you get a refined rather than a ballpark answer. The ballpark answer is surrender is the essence, and the realization that is the fruit of that surrender is further. So Lord Chaitanya didn't reject 1866, go further. Then there's other subtle points about why 1854 comes after 1866. But you'll find that in those places I just mentioned. And if it's really important, I'll get the text and read it again, because it's there.
Second part, why would Lord Chaitanya reject 18.66?
Well, go further. So the principle of Mam Ekam Sharanam, that's the essence. He didn't reject it. Go further. I mean, you can say he rejected it. Go further. Because, let's just take, where the discussion goes further. There is further discussion, not only of principles of bhakti, but the application of surrender with degrees of intensity and degrees of rasa, and different descriptions like that. And within rasas, depths of those rasas, within conjugal rasas, where the discussion goes. So it's not rejecting surrender. Surrender is the essence. It's go further. Let that surrender, Mam Ekam Sharanam, in its matured stage, what are some of its symptoms, what does it look like, etc. Anything in the room?
Yes, Guru Maharaj.
Anything in the room before you go on to reading something? Is there anything in the room somebody would like to raise? You have something? Okay. And speak up a little bit too. It's on.
My question is, Maharaj, in this today's class, the Swarupa Sakti, that when if you want to get Krishna's mercy, then we need to go through Radharani's first to get the Krishna's mercy. But my question is, Nityananda, Balaram is the direct expansion of Krishna. So, is it Balaram or Radharani?
Well, that's a nice question. Very nice question. And even before Nityananda or Balaram are their expansions. And their expansions are gurus. The guru is either representative of Radharani or representative of Nityananda. That's in Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is very elevated subject, but no problem. So when requires the mercy of the empowered representatives of Lord Nityananda, the spiritual master, the original spiritual master is Balaram or Lord Nityananda, and any current spiritual master is receiving empowerment from Lord Nityananda through disciplic succession, but from Lord Nityananda. So you get the mercy of the spiritual master to get the mercy of Lord Nityananda to get the mercy of Krishna or Lord Chaitanya. Then there's Radharani. Now, someone, a lot of this, it's very esoteric, but a lot of this depends upon the mood of bhakti of the representative, as the representative of Lord Nityananda, the representative of Radharani. To get the mercy of Radharani, we don't just go knock on her door. We get the mercy of those who are getting her mercy. And then there's a whole, chain of how her mercy is flowing to us. So it's the answer to your question is, it depends on the mood of the bhakta and the mood of the guru, which place one feels is the spirit of receiving mercy of Krishna from, and maybe even a mix. So it's very much a matter of the heart, of the bhakta, and by Krishna's arrangements, one will get guru that suits, or an emphasis. And a particular guru may recognize a mood in a disciple this way, mood in a disciple that way. And that's in a very elevated stage, which we're not in yet. So what's important for us at our stage is take shelter of the spiritual master in principle, and the esoteric parts will engage in service. By pleasing the spiritual master, we please Krishna, that we know. So we do that, and the more esoteric parts will become revealed in time.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, I have 3 questions if time permits. Number 1, how to differentiate between actual faith and blind faith?
2 things come to mind: consistency as opposed to intermittent or circumstantial driven. If faith is intermittent or circumstantial driven, then it's more in the category of blind following or blind faith. And then the second is alignment with Scripture. If it's aligned with Scripture, then it's not blind faith, it's authoritative or descending.
Second, how do we know that the feelings we have is love for Krishna, or we are being sentimental?
Well, my standard answer for something like this is there's a mix. And you can assume that there's a mix. And to what degree there's a mix is less important than making your efforts to go to the unmixed. And the unmixed standard is related to the first question, whether it's not circumstantial. My service is not dependent upon circumstance. If service is dependent upon, I'm enthusiastic now because the circumstances are favorable. In Kali Yuga, there's not a lot of favorable circumstances. So beyond circumstance, my enthusiasm to serve is based on I'm meant for Krishna service, and that's the position I want to take, and I'm enlivened and enthused by taking that position. Now that's an somewhat advanced position, but then it's not circumstance created or destroyed. Ahaitukiya pratyataya yatma suprasidati.
Guru Maharaj, we might have lost them, some technical glitch, but I can ask another question.
Okay.
Okay, the third question she asked is, can our possessiveness for Krishna
Can
interfere?
our what?
Possessiveness.
Positiveness. Possessiveness.
Possessiveness
Okay.
for Krishna interfere with other people's devotion, how they offer the service to Krishna, if that does not comply with our own values?
Well, there's no conflict in the taking the spiritual dimension of possessiveness. There is no conflict. You'd have a material idea of possessiveness, guaranteed there's going to be conflict. But in the spiritual realm, let's say the possessiveness of the gopas and the possessiveness of the gopis, and then amongst the gopis, the different sense of possessiveness is not in conflict. Now, even when it comes to the left wing and right wing gopis, for example, it looks like conflict, but it's an intensification of feelings of love for Krishna. That's what's happening. So it intensifies the sense of possessiveness. It's not the conflict that this person is asking sounds like the material kind of possessiveness and conflict with someone else's service. In our realm, we're not very advanced devotees, so we must, it's enjoined for us to be respectful of others' devotion. We don't trample on others' devotion. You may bring your devotion internal, you may not also, but depending upon the mood and the purpose of another devotee. So we don't avoid conflict, we just don't create it. But that's a cultured person acts that way. A non-cultured person is brash and does whatever. Devotee, non-devotee.
Without knowing about Lord Krishna enough, how will someone engage in unalloyed devotion? Is that inspirational or aspirational goal?
Again, there are stages of bhakti, and like the example that was given in the commentary, we heard about Arjun's not knowing. Now, Arjun's not knowing had to do with his intensity of love. Because of his intensity of love, there was a sweetness in their exchange, and he wasn't conscious of nor acting upon the standard of who Krishna is. But it was eclipsed by his intensity of love. So now there's different levels of bhakti. So let's come down a little bit to us, and amongst the sadhakas, there are different levels of understanding Krishna. There's different levels of possessing spiritual quality, like tolerance and simplicity and truthfulness and so on. There's degrees of all of that. So the question is very broad, and my answer is depends on the level of devotion, genuine, non-deceptive devotion to Krishna that we have. Depending upon that, then you can answer, the question can be answered or responded to. How do we see and how do we act according to the relative position of ourselves and others around us? It requires a refined consciousness. Krishna will guide one who wants to please him. That's it? Anything else in the room? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Jai.